Good evening. I'm PBS 39 host Monica Evans. On May 15th, voters in the 7th Congressional District will go to the polls to select a new representative for the seat vacated by U.S. Congressman Charlie Dent. Dent represented the 15th Congressional District, which spanned from Hershey to north of Nazareth. In February, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court adopted a new congressional map and created a new 7th District, which includes Lehigh, Northampton, and Monroe counties. Tonight, we present the candidates vying for Dent's seat, who participated in the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum on May 2nd. Here are the candidates. Roger Ruggles is a civil and environmental engineering professor at Lafayette College and an Easton City Council member. John Morganelli is the Northampton County District Attorney. Susan Wild is an attorney who served as Allentown solicitor from 2015 to 2017. David Clark is a retired social worker who ran for Congress in '92, challenging Democratic Congressman Paul McHale. Greg Edwards is a pastor and founder of the Resurrected Life Community Church in Allentown. Rick Dougherty is a social worker who lost his bid for Congress twice to Dent, and he's hoping the third time will be the charm. Dean Browning is the only Republican candidate who attended the forum. He is the Chief Financial Officer of New World Aviation and a former Lehigh County Commissioner. There are two other candidates running for the 7th Congressional District who did not participate in the forum. They are Republican candidate Marty Notstein, a Lehigh County Commissioner, and Libertarian candidate Tim Selfies, a journalist. Lafayette College political science professor John Kincaid and I served as co-moderators of the forum. We begin the forum with the candidates' opening statements.
Candidates have 1 minute for an opening statement. As agreed, we will start with Roger Ruggles, and we will work our way across. Roger.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to try to project all the way down to the other end of the room, but I get an okay. My name is Roger Ruggles. My wife and I have lived here in Easton for 33 years, the period of time that I've been teaching at Lafayette College. My wife and I have been married for it will be 42 years next month, and we have 4 children, and we have 7.8 grandchildren, one due in June. What I would like to impress upon you guys tonight about me is my background. I'm an educator. I'm a licensed professional civil engineer. I have sat on city council in Easton for 10 years. I've traveled internationally as a Fulbright scholar, and I'm a very, very involved in community volunteering. So those are the types of things I would want to impress upon you tonight about me. Thank you very much.
Mr. Morganelli.
Thank you. Throughout my whole life, I've taken on the tough fights. My dad was a son of Italian immigrants. He had a 6th grade education. My mom, she's Irish, and she had an 11th grade education. And my family stressed education. And I promised that if I got through high school and college, which I did at Moravian, and law school at Villanova, I'd come back to the Lehigh Valley and work on behalf of average folks like my mom and dad. That's what I did. I started a law practice and represented the average folks, even represented a labor union. In 1991, I got elected DA, and I've taken on the tough fights there. We've broken down barriers. I hired the first African-American and second African-American assistant DAs in Northampton County history on day 1. I increased women on our staff from 5% to 50% on day 1 and fought for a mental health court to get mentally ill people out of the criminal justice system. And yes, I did prosecute the bad guys and took off our streets some of Pennsylvania's most dangerous predators and criminals to protect our community. Now I want to go to Washington to fight for a Democratic agenda and to make sure that average folks have a chance. The Democrats have always had my family's back, and I'll have your back.
Susan Wild.
Thank you. My name is Susan Wild. I'm the mother of 2 millennials, a son and a daughter, and I've been a lawyer since 1982, so you can probably do the math. I'm 60 years old, and I've been practicing law for more than 35 years. And I decided to run for Congress because I am genuinely worried about the future of my children, your children, our grandchildren. And on the other end of the spectrum, I'm very concerned about seniors who are constantly being threatened with cuts to their Medicare and Social Security benefits so that Republicans can make up the gap in revenue that they have created by massive tax cuts for the billionaire class. That's why I'm running for Congress. I want to fight for ordinary folks, real people, students, and the elderly. I don't want to talk about change anymore. I want to be the change. I want to work on gun violence. I want to find solutions for astronomical student debt. I believe in science, and I want to make it part of our daily dialogue about the environment and climate change. I want to treat immigrants like the human beings they are and provide for humane ways to fix our broken immigration system. That's me. That's what I'm all about. Thank you.
David Clark.
Hi, I'm Dave Clark. We have a lot of people running for this office, and everybody here is basically qualified to do this job. What separates me from everyone else is two important issues. One is I want to remove Donald Trump from presidential responsibilities until the Mueller investigation is over, because he is a danger to this country and the world, and he will not accept the findings of Mueller. Okay? He's already sending out yo-yos to say, start a civil war. He will not accept it. If he doesn't have the presidential responsibilities, that will make things a lot safer. And the second thing is, we are broke with these tax cuts, and the national debt is national debt is $20 trillion. I want to go to a graduated income tax like we had during the Eisenhower and Carter era. And we'll be able to balance the budget, and we'll have funds for everything else.
Greg Edwards.
Good evening. My name is Greg Edwards. I'm 48 years old. I've been married for 24 years. I have 4 children, a doctorate degree in public policy. For the last 25 years, I've built social movements to advocate for human and civil rights, addressing issues of inequity in healthcare, education, and economic development. I'm running for Congress because I believe that we have an imbalance of economic power due mostly to the lack of campaign finance reform. Everything we need to do to create a more just and perfect union is sitting dead in committees because we don't hold the majority of seats. Whenever we try to move towards a more perfect union by creating universal health care, we've got big pharma. We've got healthcare industries that are pushing back against us. When we want to create comprehensive immigration reform, they dog whistle about the Browning of America. When we want to be able to pass all types of legislation due to universal preschool and debt-free college, we've got vouchers and charter schools. Now is the time for us to be bold and put people before corporate profitability. That's why I'm running. When the power of the people meet the people in power, that's the nexus of change.
Thank you. Mr. Dougherty.
Hi, I'm Rick Dougherty, and I am from the Lehigh Valley. Grew up in West Bethlehem. I went through the Catasauqua School District, and I graduated from Raven College with a degree in social work. That's when I got involved in politics, because I quickly realized that you can work with somebody one-on-one, but it's Harrisburg and Washington that have a huge impact on our lives, individually and as a community. I'm currently at Lehigh Valley Active Life Senior Center. I've been there for 22 years. It is by far the best job I will ever have. And I was the district administrator for Congressman Paul McHale. He was the last Democratic congressman in the Lehigh Valley. I believe you need to focus on a particular mission, issue, thing you want to change in going to Congress. And my focus is going to be helping senior citizens. I'll fight for more funding for Social Security, more at-home care through Medicare, lower prescription drug prices, better options for transportation, and more housing for senior citizens. Thank you.
Mr. Browning.
Good evening. My name is Dean Browning. I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you tonight. I would especially like to thank the League of Women Voters and their volunteers for the effort that they put forward to put relevant information in front of voters before elections. Thank you very much for that. I usually start off my opening remarks with a verse of Scripture, Proverbs 29:18, which is, "Without vision, the people perish." If you look at Washington, far too often their vision is doing what they're told to do or saying what they think they need to do to get reelected. I've had the opportunity to listen to the Democrats that are running. I thank them for the courage of stepping forward. I think this is the 63rd or 64th debate that I've heard that you guys have had. I know what your vision is. It's a fairly unified vision. I have a different vision. My vision is a different trajectory for our country. I believe that the election of Donald Trump is the way to achieve that vision. I plan to work in Washington to make that a reality. Thank you.
Candidates, thank you so much for your opening statements. Let's begin with questions. We'll start with Roger Ruggles. If Congress fails to act, Social Security funds will be depleted in 2034. Retirees of 85 years of age usually have outlived other sources of income. What would you do to avoid major disruptions of the finances of the elderly in the future as a congressman?
I believe that this is paramount of any congressional representative, is to protect the Social Security system. I'm right there. I mean, I'll be 65 this year, so I know exactly what people are going through. And what I would do is I would be physically prudent. I believe that our government spends a lot of money that is not necessary to spend. I think there's a lot of things that we have that we can trim back as far as overspending of personnel and those types of things. But I think if we budget properly, I think that we could make that into the future much longer. Thank you.
First of all, what we need to do is we have to shore up Social Security. I have an 87-year-old mom who depends on Social Security and Medicare, and we have to make sure that these programs are there for seniors and for the future. One of the things I'd like to do is to raise the base rate that we tax on. Back in 1983, when Ronald Reagan created the tax, it was at $118,000. We never raised it. It was a 90% basically of wages recovered. Now, in order to get back to that ratio, we need to raise that to $240,000 so that we can collect more revenue in to the system to shore up the Social Security program. That's one of the major problems we have. We've never been, as people's salaries went, we've never raised that. So we need to raise that to about $240,000, and it'll be on the same par of about 90% of the wage base that existed when the program was started.
Thank you. I join in the sentiment that we must protect Social Security at all costs. I believe we have to, I agree that we should raise the base rate, but I also believe that we have to stop maxing out the contributions at a certain income, and that Social Security should be paid at all levels of income. And I agree also that we must have prudent investing. We absolutely cannot take away from the Social Security funds because we are giving to the rich and to the billionaire class. Those earned benefits must remain intact.
Social Security is one of the best programs we ever had, and it's an insurance for the people that grow old. I would like to see what John mentioned, and Susan, that the amount of income that is taxed is increased. But what I would like to propose is that it be based on wealth. The more wealth you have, the older the age for retirement. Because most people who work hard all their life, their bodies are worn out by the time they're 65 or 67. And the people who are like multimillionaires and billionaires usually live longer and are healthier, so they should be receiving Social Security at a later age.
I would concur that we need to lift the income cap off of Social Security and extend full Social Security benefits. It's unfathomable that the wealthiest nation in the world has a senior population which 45% of our seniors live on an income less than $25,000 a year. And we need to make sure that all those Medicare expenses that are absolutely robbing our seniors of the opportunity to retire with dignity are fully extended.
I just want to start by saying Social Security is a democratic program, and it's something we have to be very proud about. We're the ones that got it in place. Of course, I agree with the wage cap being increased, and that makes Social Security financially sound. But it's more than that. The cost of living adjustment is based on an urban worker, not a retiree. And my calculation is that senior citizens have been cheated out of 70% of what they should have got with the cost of living adjustment, higher Social Security amounts. If you're working 30 years, the base amount of Social Security is at $848. So that means you were breaking your back at a low-paying job for 30 years, and you get $848. That's got to be higher. So Social Security, with the wage cap increase, is financially sound. It's a democratic program, but we have to go further. We have to make sure that the base amount is higher and cost of living adjustments actually reflect the inflation that seniors experience. Thank you.
We have a series of problems with Social Security. You heard earlier a gentleman mention that our national debt is at $20 trillion. Roughly 14% of that, or over $2 trillion, is held in the Social Security Trust Fund. That means that money was collected for Social Security and spent on other government programs. One of the first things that we need to do is to move to a balanced budget so that we stop spending Social Security money for other operating expenses within the government. The idea of increasing the wage cap, unless you increase the benefits that go along with that, all you're doing is increasing taxes, which will hamper the economy. I am in favor of changing the indexing formula for Social Security. I do think it is unfair for seniors that they have gone so long without a cost of living increase, and that is due to the fact that there's a misallocation within the approach that we use to calculate their cost of living adjustment. And I'm in favor of changing that.
Okay, thank you. The next question is two parts but related. Do you support abortion, and if so, under what conditions, if any? And do you support abortion paid by the government, such as the Medicaid program? And Mr. Morganelli, we'll start with you on this question.
Thank you very much. I'm a pro-life Democrat. I was raised as a Catholic. It's a moral issue with me. My position has been very clear for many years. I believe that abortion should be available for rape, incest, life of the mother, and extreme fetal deformity. I do support a fully funded Planned Parenthood because I believe Planned Parenthood provides numerous services for women that are not abortion related, and we can't just defund the organization because some people agree with part of what they do. They do a lot much more than that. I also do believe that health care plans have to cover it. It is the law of the land. Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. I accept it as the law of the land. And it's basically just a moral position for me. But I don't think we should defund Planned Parenthood or not allow health plans to cover the services. It's legal.
I take issue with the way the question was posed. I don't support abortion. I support choice. I believe firmly in a woman's right to choose and in reproductive rights. I do believe in federal funding for contraceptive care and for abortion care. However, to call it support for abortion or talk about abortion rights, that's not the issue. The issue is a woman's right to choose and to make her own medical decisions with her doctor without interference from the government. That's what I stand for. I don't believe that implementing a system of exceptions or being pro-life with exceptions works, because if we are going to have exceptions for something like incest or rape, what are we going to do? Are we going to have mini hearing courts but that women have to be subjected to before they have that right to choose? I submit to you that that is not proper, and that the only person in that examination room with a physician should be the woman and perhaps her partner.
No one here likes abortion, okay? Nobody likes it. But I will always protect a woman's right to choose, and it's a decision that she has to make with herself and her doctor. What I'm seeing religion creeping into government, and the groups that are against abortion are basically religious groups that claim to be pro-life. Well, they're just pro-birth, because once the child is born, they don't want to care for the child. They don't want to provide housing. They don't want to provide food stamps for a poor mother who has a ninth grade education and 5 children and no husband. She can't get a job, and they want to cut everything, okay? So I am all for protecting the woman's right to choose.
I support reproductive choice and also reproductive justice, because we know that not all women, because of race and socioeconomic groups, have opportunity as some dominant culture women have. And I don't believe it's absolutely anyone's right to tell any other person, specifically me as a person of color, who at one time was considered 3/5 of a human being, that I have the right to tell any person what to do with their body. I totally support bodily autonomy, and I think that all health insurance plans, be it from the federal or privatized medicine, have an opportunity to provide fully funded contraception and abortion as needed.
I'm also a pro-life Democrat, and I'm an Episcopalian, so this is not a religious decision for me. We're a pro-choice church. There's very little, I think, that's going to happen on this because of Roe v. Wade. At this point, constitutionally, you cannot restrict abortion after viability, and viability at this point is defined at about 23 weeks. I do not support federal funding for any abortions. However, I do support much more funding and housing and services for people in need, whether it's a woman who's pregnant and has few resources, whether it's somebody that has mental health issues, whether it's somebody coming out of prison. We as a society need to be there very forcefully and clearly to help people who are in need. And that's one of the ways that we would be able to, we would limit abortions and we'd give people more options. And that's what I would support very heavily.
I'd like to start off by reading a quote from Mother Teresa that she delivered at a national prayer breakfast approximately 20 years ago. Any country that accepts abortion is not teaching its people to love one another, but to use any violence to get what they want. That is why the greatest destroyer of love and peace is abortion. Unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court has determined that is a constitutional right. If I'm elected as congressman, you should be aware that I will take steps legislatively to do the following. Number one, to ban partial birth abortion. Number two, to ban abortions that are used to select the sex of a baby or where there's a diagnosis of Down syndrome. Number three, I will require that any abortion provider must have admitting privileges at a local hospital. And number four, I will oppose federal funding for Planned Parenthood. Thank you.
This next question comes from the audience.
Oh,
I'm sorry, pardon me. Pardon me.
coming around.
You have the floor.
My position on this is I believe that there is the dividing line that what Roe v. Wade has created. There is a period of time where I believe women have the right to choose. But there comes a time when the life is viable, and I think at that point in time, it's the responsibility of the state to ensure that that life survives. And so I believe that Roe v. Wade has created that particular dividing line. And to move on to the second point, as far as Planned Parenthood is concerned, I fully support Planned Parenthood. I think what John was saying, the medical provisions that they provide for communities in general, not just women, men and women, throughout the entire community, is something that we really, really need. Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to the audience question. Are you all willing to publicly pledge tonight that you will not accept campaign contributions from the NRA or any of its gun lobby affiliates? If so, why? If not, why not? And Susan, we'll start with you.
I make that pledge. I've already made that pledge on several occasions, and I will never accept any funds whatsoever from the NRA or any other similar organization.
I would make that pledge. I will never receive or accept any contributions from any group that I am in disagreement with.
We've made a pledge in our campaign not to accept any money from the NRA, but also any corporate PAC money, because it's tied to special interest and lobbyists who have a one-sided agenda, once again, to advance that economic imbalance of power. Absolutely.
I support universal background checks. I support banning bump stocks. I believe the waiting period for getting a gun should be extended. The incident in South Carolina, that young man who killed all those people in the church shouldn't have got that gun, but because the waiting period was 3 days, he got the gun because the report didn't come back. And because of that and many more, I'll never get any funding from the NRA, and I'm very comfortable with that.
As I said in my opening statement, you will see a unified vision from this end of the table, and I will have a different vision. I'm a life member of the NRA, and I am proud to say so. There is no other organization in this country that is more dedicated to gun safety than the NRA. They exist to protect the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens, and therefore I would be happy and honored if they would choose to support my campaign. Thank you.
I will not take any money from the NRA. I will not take any money from any PAC. My campaign that I'm running is a very, 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 very low budget campaign. And I tell you, I got a few dollars in my pocket here, and that's about it. So I think taking money out of politics is a very important thing. And when you start talking about organizations that are making influence by them contributing money, why should we take that money? That influence should not be there.
In 2008, when I was a Democratic candidate for State Attorney General, I got an F rating from the NRA. And that's because I was in favor of reinstating the assault ban, the assault weapon ban that was in existence in the 90s. I was in favor of holding gun owners responsible when their guns are used in crime by people who live in their home who were either mentally ill or children. They allowed easy access. I'm against the sale of bump stocks. So the NRA is never going to write me a check. I would never take one. Having an F grade, I think I'm the only Democratic candidate that has gotten that grade from them. And I was endorsed back then and have been at least twice by Ceasefire of Pennsylvania, which, as you all know, is an anti-gun organization. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next question is about taxes. What is your opinion of the recently enacted tax law change by Congress? And if you were elected to Congress, what would you propose to make any changes in that law? I'll start with you, Mr. Clark.
That the tax law was horrible. It's the biggest giveaway to the wealthy. It leads to inequality of wealth. I mentioned in my opening statement, we have to go back to a graduated income tax, where the middle class and the lower wage people would have a lower tax, and as you go up, the tax goes higher. We'll be able to balance the budget, and we'll have the funds for infrastructure and everything else. We can't even help Puerto Rico. And when was the hurricane? We are broke. Republican trickle-down doesn't work.
The tax reform job creation bill was a farce. It's based upon trickle-down economics that says somehow, magically and mysteriously, if the wealthiest of Americans somehow get a tax break, they're going to, from the benevolence of their heart, give it to people who are the working poor, which is like me getting a raise and giving my next-door neighbor a refrigerator. It just doesn't work that way. We've got to increase the robust economy through the middle class by making sure that no one's left behind, not cutting entitlement programs, and putting more money into the pockets of everyday working Americans, specifically by raising the minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 an hour. The deficit has been created by Republicans who refuse to take credit for the deficit that they have created.
So the increase in the standard deduction, I thought, was a good move. The limiting of the mortgage deduction to $750,000, I thought, was a good move. And then the Republicans are saying all the other tax breaks for the wealthy are going to be funneled back into job creation. Well, we'll see. We've heard that before, and we haven't necessarily seen that before. President Clinton, if you remember, back in '95, had put a tax package together that gave us over a decade of prosperity. Congresswoman Mezvinsky was the singular vote to get that through in Montgomery County. Because of that vote, courageous vote, she lost her seat. But we had 10 years of prosperity. So we'll see what happens. There's also a piece in that tax legislation that seems to reward companies for moving jobs overseas, which is the reverse of what we heard in the campaign. So when we get in, we will see the effects of that tax legislation. I think we know what we're going to see, and I'll act accordingly to cut out the stuff that isn't helping us, but maybe helping wealthy people.
As I said, I've listened to a number of debates, and I've heard repeatedly that we need to go to a graduated income system. I wasn't aware that we had a flat one to begin with. The fact of the matter is that the bottom 2 quintiles of our population pay no federal income tax. I'm fully supportive of the President's tax law. It provides income to working men and women. I know that for a fact from people at my company. It does away with the state and local tax deduction that penalizes states like Pennsylvania and forces us to pay more in taxes for higher tax states like New York and New Jersey. And thirdly, it has lowered the corporate tax rate to allow our corporations and our businesses to compete with the rest of the world. That will bring capital into the United States, that will grow the economy, and that will create more jobs. So I am fully in favor of the tax plan.
I am not in favor of tax cuts for the wealthy, and nor am I in favor of tax cuts for industry. When the rate for industry got lowered substantially, 12 percentage points, I believe, that is a huge amount of money that is lost to the federal government. So I would not be in favor of either one of those. I think that as you become more wealthy, you also take upon more responsibility. And I think that responsibility comes as a financial responsibility, and people should step up and do that.
Thank you. I think as Rick Doherty mentioned, there were some things that were attractive and perhaps, hopefully, we won't know for sure for a while, will help some middle-class folks. The biggest objection, though, with it, aside from the fact that it certainly was tilted to the very wealthy, and that's why no Democrat supported it in Congress, but the other reason that it was not a great bill is because the tax cut that actually goes into effect for the middle-class folks sunsets. It sunsets. So it's not a permanent tax cut. And, we have to look at reality here. The Republican president, Republican Senate, Republican House. We have no leverage. So what do? We have to either get back to the majority and fix it, or we have to try to work to perhaps let's get something accomplished by at least getting permanent the tax relief that exists for some folks. And we're not going to really know the full effect or how popular it is until later when people start filling out their tax returns again. And I think that's what we have to look at. But it was not a great bill as it was written.
Newsflash, trickle-down economics doesn't work. Never has, never will. The only long-term beneficiaries of that tax bill, that recent tax bill, are billionaires and corporations, and the recipients of very, very large estates. We already have federal exemptions for much more modest estates, so that most of the people in this room, upon inheriting money, do not pay federal taxes on that. So what we have done with this recent tax bill is created an exemption for the uber wealthy who inherit those very, very large estates. So what's happened is that tax bill created a huge gap in our country's revenue. And the very next thing that happened was that Paul Ryan started talking about going after your earned benefits, Social Security and Medicare. So no, I am absolutely not in favor of that tax bill.
The cost of higher education continues to increase, and more students are graduating from college with high levels of debt. What ideas, if any, do you have for making higher education more affordable for Pennsylvanians?
Well, first of all, we need to I think it's time we explore the whole notion of student loan debt forgiveness. There's economic models that state on both sides of the aisle that by doing that, the GDP will be boosted by $83 billion to $103 billion, 10 years annually. And so that's one thing we can do. The other thing we can do is we can ensure that every person who wants to go to school, who wants to go to college, who qualifies to get in school, is able to get a college degree and not come out shackled with debt. I've got $45,000 of student debt. I've dotted all my I's, I've crossed all my T's, and still I've got to pay that bill every year. I've got no problem with that. But when college is no longer a pathway to prosperity, but poverty, that's problematic. A Wall Street speculation tax that basically is a fraction of a percentage, which equals about $75 billion a year, can make sure that students that want to go to state-based institutions can go and not come out shackled with debt. And we don't want to penalize folks for being critical thinkers.
Lower student interest rates, more funding for community colleges. And when I was in school at Moravian, and I got a degree in social work, and you graduate and you get a job, you don't get a top-paying job. But I paid off my student debts in 5 years. Sadly, Ronald Reagan was elected, and my younger brother didn't have that same chance. My father passed away when I was 15, and when I got to school, if you stayed in school, Social Security survivor benefits continued. So there's somebody whose parent passed away, and the government was saying, hey, you want to better yourself? We're on your side. And Reagan cut it out. My younger brother didn't have that. So there's a couple of things that we can look at, and those are three that I think if we had in place would be great. Keep in mind, though, very quickly, in Allentown, 1 in 4 kids has a lead blood level that's at a dangerous level. It affects cognitive functioning. Let's make sure that our kids are prepared to be able to choose, if they wish, to go to college or vocational school. We've got to focus on that also.
We need to keep in mind where we are as a country financially. The fiscal year that will begin October 1, the projection is that we will have a $1 trillion deficit, that we will spend $4.4 trillion and take in $3.4 trillion in revenue. And in deference to my colleagues two chairs down, that has not changed whether it's been Republicans or Democrats in control of Congress. We have a spending problem. We cannot go forward and offer free programs, free college, free tuition. The student loan program is an example of a government program that started out with good intentions but has resulted in the exact opposite. By guaranteeing student loans, we have encouraged them to take them. We have encouraged colleges to increase their expenses because they know the students will borrow money, federally guaranteed to cover that. Roughly 40% of the student loan debt is held by graduate students. My solution is we need to remove the federal guarantee for student loans and let them do that on the free market basis.
I believe there are lots of things that can be done. I just left 25 students in my senior class about an hour ago. And I know the problems that students have with that. One of the things that's very important is to try to get better career guidance for students coming into college. Oftentimes they'll come in and they will wander around for a couple years trying to figure out what they want to do. And usually that wastes a year for them. And that's another year of tuition. I think also the loans that are given to students vary in interest rates. And some of them are extremely, extremely high. The federal government should step in and make those loans at a very affordable rate. I think also we should encourage schools not to cause students to go 5 years. I know students who, I can't get this course and therefore I have to stay another year of tuition. So there's lots of things that can be done.
This issue is an issue that I think I may have been one of the first candidates to bring up because I've seen it firsthand in my office with a lot of young assistant DAs saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. So what can Congress do? First of all, Congress sets the interest rates. So rather than going upward, which is where they're going, we need to start lowering the rate and get it in line again where it was so it's affordable. Congress sets that. Number two is that we need to allow students to refinance their loans. Although they're allowed to do so, they lose the forgiveness program. They get outside. We got to allow them to still have the forgiveness program when they refinance. So we got to fix that. Third, we've got to give incentives to private businesses for forgiveness programs. Right now, if you do public service, like assistant DA, you can get forgiveness of your student loan. But we got to give incentives to the private sector, and we could do that with like 401k incentives to let private people also institute those. And lastly, we need to allow the kids, let me look at my point here. I can't read my handwriting, but there's another point I wanted to make, sorry. I'll think of it later in my closing, so. Go ahead, Susan.
I put myself through college and law school, and when I graduated from law school in 1982, I was broke, and I thought I was going to be broke for the rest of my life. But thankfully, at that point in time, interest rates were such that by the time I had favorable repayment provisions, I was able to defer my loans until I was making an income where I could manage the monthly payment, which, as I recall, was something like $102 a month, and seemed like a lot at the time. And by the time I was 40, I was fortunate enough to have paid off my loans. That is not possible anymore, and it has to be changed. We must restructure student loan debt. It's not fair that their interest rates on those loans are higher than what we pay for mortgages and car loans, and they will never be able to be consumers in a way that grows our GDP because they are saddled with this ridiculously high amount of student loan debt and high interest rates.
One of the biggest problems with the student loan debts is the interest, and it's a job of congressmen to bring those interest rates down. But along the way, there's a couple other things. One is, I really think they should consider higher scores, SAT scores, in order to be giving out these $40,000 and $50,000 loans, because some of these children are failing in school and they still have these loans. So make sure that they qualify. Also, if we go to a graduated income tax, we will have the money for education, and we can increase Pell Grants, where people can get a shot of money to assist them in getting into school, and then they can just take out a loan to finish the school. And that's the direction I would take.
If states are spending less on higher education, they're spending more on Medicaid. Medicaid is now the single largest category of state spending on average across the country, and will continue to grow as our population ages. So if you were elected to Congress, what would you propose to do about the Medicaid program consuming an ever larger share, particularly of state budgets? What do you see as the federal responsibility to assist the states in the Medicaid program? Mr. Doherty, we'll start with you.
So let's remember that we're talking about health care. We're talking about our health. I believe everybody in this room would raise their hand if we could wish that we never have to see a doctor or go to a hospital because we're just so darn healthy. So this is not spending that is getting anybody rich, getting anybody famous, making anybody money. It's us as a community working together to try to stay healthy for us, for our community, for our loved ones, and particularly for senior citizens. And so any type of program that looks to provide preventative care, I think, needs to be a top priority. And this goes across the gamut. This goes to fruits and vegetables and the Farm and Food Bill, supporting growers of fruits and vegetables. It goes to exercise components. It goes to preventative care. It goes to all of that we need to focus on, because the high cost of health care is often because people do not get that treatment early on, and their diseases progress, their life is worse, and the expense on all of us is higher, and nobody wants that.
Between the two of them, Medicare and Medicaid cost roughly $1 trillion a year. Out of the $4.4 trillion that we're going to spend next year, fully a quarter of that will be from Medicare and Medicaid. I think it's important for us to control costs, but provide quality service for seniors, particularly those who have paid their entire working life into the Medicare system. I'm in favor of grants to states to allow them to experiment with managing the Medicare program through voucher systems, through innovation at the state level, and developing low-cost solutions to delivering health care.
I'm a strong supporter of both Medicare and Medicaid. I believe that health care is a right. and I think that's something that should be provided to everyone. As far as funding for Medicare and Medicaid, I believe that the states need to have greater federal support on that. But I also believe that the amount of support that they get, they need to spend more wisely. We need to control the cost of medical care. As if medical care grows exponentially, it's going to be impossible to fund it. And so we need to be able to control that and to control medication. Medication, people spend so much money on medication and the number of drugs that they actually have to take just to stay healthy. And so I believe that we need to control that, and we need to control medical costs.
I remembered that student debt issue. I want to just say, what we also have to do is, when loans are forgiven, they become taxable to the kids. That's ridiculous. So we got to eliminate that. When they forgive the loan, it's not taxable. And we need to fix that, and Congress can do that. Okay, you asked about Medicaid, correct? Not Medicare. I mean, Medicare is for seniors 65 and up and covers certain diseases, and Medicare was expanded over the years, including Medicare D. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Medicaid, which is really a program for poor folks. And Medicare doesn't have an income test, but Medicaid does. We have to fully fund Medicaid. And, you know, budgeting is priorities. And priorities is taking care of folks. And Medicaid is essential to protect the poor folks, to make sure that they get health insurance in the system we have. If we change the system and we go to universal health care or something better down the road, well, then we can fix this. But right now, we got to keep funding Medicaid because it's a lifeline for the poor folks to get medical treatment.
We have a perversion of priorities in this country. We open our checkbook to defense contractors, but we don't provide health care for everyone as a matter of right. I believe that we have a federal responsibility to provide good, accessible health care to everyone. We have a terrible problem in this country with health care inequality. If you can afford good health care, you get it. If you can't afford it, you don't, and that's all there is to it. And we can realign things in the budget. We need, as I said, I think we have a perversion of priorities in terms of what we spend money on in this country, and we absolutely must provide health care for all, and that would solve the Medicaid problem to the states. The other thing that I have to say is we must get profit out of health care. Private insurance companies are making a ton of money on health care insurance policies. We would get that out of the health care cost, and that would thereby reduce overall health care costs.
I wish I had an hour to answer this question. I've studied all the universal health care programs in like Australia, Canada, Denmark, Sweden. I like France and England. Our hospitals and clinics are ripping off Medicaid. I have a friend who's on disability, and I saw the billing. $900 for 1 hour of physical therapy, okay? This is what's happening. I have a universal health care plan that I put together by drawing on all the other countries where we could save $200 billion a year on Medicaid health care costs, okay? And that hospitals, clinics, doctors, everybody would be working under the government, and they would all be receiving a standard wage, and everything would be predictable, and costs would come in line.
So Medicaid is driven by income and Medicare by age. And what we saw under the Obama administration is that people who were not in line with President Obama's agenda, specifically states, took their block grants and basically made poor folks shameful for being sick. We've got to move towards a universal health care system that works for everyone. And the only way to do that is to make sure that from the womb to the tomb, we do not commodify health care. Health care is not an entitlement. It's a part of our democracy. And the sick citizenry doesn't make sense and cannot contribute to the national economy or ensure our national defense.
Given one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, prison overcrowding, and racial disparity in sentencing, the U.S. prisons are in desperate need of reform. What reforms and possible alternatives to the existing system would you enact as a congressman?
I've often thought that for these debates it would be helpful if you had a rebuttal section, because I'm sure there are many folks that want to rebut what I'm saying and vice versa. We have an incarceration problem in this country because of drugs and the fact that we have criminalized possession of small amounts of drugs. I think one of the solutions that we need to take a look at is decriminalizing certain levels of drug use and possession.
There are many, many, many things that could be done in our criminal justice system. But let me just give you a few. My wife goes into prison every week, okay? She teaches a course for Better You, okay? And we work with her students in the course oftentimes when they get out of jail. Oftentimes these guys come out and they have nothing, because when they were arrested and taken to jail, all of their possessions were in their apartment and they all got thrown away into the dumpster. They have no ID, nothing. Our criminal justice system basically makes those people come back into the system because they don't have anything. What do? They turn around and go right back in because they go back to the crime aspect of things. That's just one thing. And it's very, very simple to solve that. Just be able to give them an ID. That's one of the solutions anyway. But there's several solutions to this, and there's many, many opportunities to make our system better.
I work in the criminal justice system, and I don't apologize for taking off dangerous criminals off our streets to protect our communities. People who go after little kids, predators, who rape women, who commit homicides deserve to be locked up. What I see, though, is some tweaks that we can make, and what I'd like to see is we have too much federalization of crime. It becomes a sexy issue for politicians to go to Washington and make the same crimes a federal crime that we prosecutors prosecute in the state. So I believe that we need to retract on federal crimes and let the state prosecutors handle it. We need to decriminalize marijuana, which I've supported for a long time now, because it's just a waste of time prosecuting these cases. And back in the 90s, I recommended, as president of the State DA's Association, a statewide study on racial profiling. It never happened because we had a Republican attorney general who wouldn't do it, but I led the fight to do that. And if we started to implement some of these programs, we would see some of the reforms happening. But I really think that we need to retract on federalization. There's an old saying, don't make a federal case about it. But guess what? They make a federal case about everything today, and that would help drop prison populations, particularly at the federal level.
No one disagrees that rapists and child predators and murderers should go to prison. But what we must do is we must stop incarcerating people for minor crimes that can be punished otherwise. That's number one. Secondly, I firmly believe not just in the decriminalization of marijuana, but in the legalization of marijuana. And I will tell you why. Number one, so much of what has happened with marijuana is that people break the law for possessing or using marijuana, and they end up in the criminal justice system, and it's a slippery slope to get out of it. By legalizing marijuana, we would do two things. One, we would provide a source of income and revenue to municipalities. And secondly, it would reduce the opioid problem. There have been studies done that show that opioid addiction is far less prevalent in states that have legalized marijuana. I firmly oppose any privatization of prisons.
One of the first things is I'm against privatization of prisons to make money. Our criminal justice system needs to be changed almost totally. I don't understand some of these sentences, like 20 and 30 years for just a technicality like you're seeing with some of the people with the Mueller investigation, okay? And yet someone who robs a bank with a gun might get 5 years, 7 years, okay? Also, I'm against mandatory sentences. I believe that judges are appointed because of their judgment, and they should have the right to be able to determine a sentence that is given before them based upon their judgment.
The United States has 5% of the world's population, and we incarcerate 25% of the world's population. We have made prisons profitable. We need to absolutely end the failed war on drugs. We need to legalize marijuana. We also need to absolutely eliminate the privatization of prisons. We need to also eliminate this notion of prison-based redistricting and restore returning citizens full rights to vote and be absolutely unapologetic about that. We've got to take a stand, and we've got to make sure that all of those folks that have served their time are able to enter our communities, being afforded every opportunity not to be shamed and penalized.
So, ban the box, decriminalize marijuana, stop jailing people because of mental health issues, stop jailing people because of substance abuse issues, provide treatment for both instead, and follow the Sixth Amendment. A fair and speedy trial and adequate representation. When John prosecutes somebody, it's not a fair fight because we don't fund public defenders. And so people who are innocent go to jail. The federal response has to be to follow the Sixth Amendment and our Constitution and our own conscience, that we provide adequate representation to anybody charged with a crime, and many fewer people will be in jail.
Dean Browning.
You was first. It's just sort of a multiple choice question on fracking. Do you believe that the federal government should considerably increase its role in regulating fracking? Do you believe that the federal government should ban fracking altogether? Or do you think we should leave the regulation of fracking up to the states as it is pretty much now? Mr. Ruggles, we'll start with you on this question. We'll be going back down the round.
I believe that this should be something that's up to the states. I know that fracking has occurred in Alaska for more than 25 years. And I believe that if the federal government says you can't do this anymore, this will put a tremendous hardship on many states. I do believe that here in Pennsylvania, that any fracking that is done, we need to ensure that we have a fund that is available, that is contributed to by those individuals that are extracting gases or oil from those wells, that would pay for any environmental cleanup if something were to happen. So I think that this should be something that is up to the state, and I believe, though, that it should have a regulation stating that they need to have some cleanup fund available.
Thank you. I basically agree with what Roger said. I think it's a state issue, but I support what Governor Wolf's trying to do in Pennsylvania. You know, we have fracking. Governor Wolf has been working very hard trying to get a severance tax. He's also been working hard to make sure that there's oversight about what's going on. We need a vigorous enforcement by the environmental protection, the state environmental protection agencies that oversee this. And, you know, if there are these violations, we need vigorous prosecution by the Attorney General's office, which has an environmental division. And I've worked with them. I referred many cases to our Attorney General over the years involving environmental issues here in Northampton County because district attorneys generally don't prosecute these cases. They're just beyond the scope of our office. We do street crime, drugs and homicides and sexual assaults and burglaries and robberies. So we need oversight, we need enforcement, and if we're going to have the states decide it, we need to do what Governor Wolf's trying to do. And as you can't let these people just become billionaires while they're going through Pennsylvania, there has to be some financial for the state.
So I'll be very candid here. I don't know whether I think it should be federally or state regulated. And this is one of the many issues that I would look to people who really have an expertise in this area for information, because no congressman or congresswoman goes to Congress and knows all of the answers. My concern with Congress right now is that they don't spend enough time listening to people with true expertise and knowledge and gaining the benefit of that knowledge and then acting upon it. Rather, things are always happening along party lines. So I don't know the exact answer to the question about federal versus state. I will tell you that I firmly believe that we must restore an effective, meaningful environmental protection agency that has teeth, has the right of adjudication, and will go after those who pollute and destroy our environment, because it's been decimated.
This issue of fracking is interesting. I'm for the states deciding, but I think the federal government has to lead the way, because this is the issue of energy. Like, do we want to continue depending on fossil fuels, okay? When Obama was president, we moved in a direction of alternative energy, okay? We didn't want drilling in the Arctic. We didn't want fracking where people are throwing all kinds of chemicals into the ground. There is no energy shortage, okay? If there's no energy shortage, why are we ripping up our country? Why are we destroying the earth? Okay, we can buy oil. There's countries willing to sell it to us, and we produce a lot on our own. So if we don't have an energy shortage, I'm against anything like fracking.
So I believe at the federal level, we need a moratorium on fossil fuel infrastructure. We lay far too many pipelines, build far too many power plants, and we are decimating the universe. We need to disincentivize the fossil fuel industry by creating a carbon fee that goes back into renewable energies and building resilient communities that have been devastated unjustly because of the fossil fuel manufacturers.
So how many Superfund sites do we have to be dealing with before we kind of figure out that companies are great, they're capitalists when they're making money, and then for cleaning up, we'll be socialists. You can clean it up for me. I mean, we're still dealing with stream pollution from coal mines that were dug over 100 years ago. So a federal response at a minimum, is to hold these companies accountable with funds to pay for their messes decades after they're already done. So these fracking shafts with concrete, well, they're going to eventually disintegrate. They're not going to last forever. And then those companies are going to be gone. The wealth is going to be reaped in by a few. And then we're all going to be asked to pay for cleaning it up. It's got to stop.
The solution to many of the problems that we have discussed tonight is a growing economy that provides prosperity for all. And that prosperity does not come from companies like Facebook or Netflix. It comes from when we extract, grow, build, and make things. To reiterate, make things. For far too long, we have tried to compete with countries like China and Mexico based on wages, and we've lost that battle. We can win that battle if we fight on what is our strength, which is energy. We are at the point where we will be the world's leading producer of petroleum, the leading producer of natural gas, and with our coal supplies, we have the capacity to be the world's low-cost energy producer. With that, we can compete with the rest of the world. We can bring manufacturing back to this country, and with that, we can bring back the middle class and the prosperity that they've enjoyed in the past. I am in favor of fracking. That is a key component of that.
This next question will start with Morganelli. What's your position on DACA, and do you believe children brought to this country illegally should have a pathway to citizenship?
Yes, I had addressed this issue early in January when it was a hot button issue that the DACA kids did nothing wrong. You know, they were brought across the border not knowing where they were going, not their free choice by either their families or friends. And it's just wrong to let them hanging. And I had advocated from day one that the DACA kids need a standalone vote. There's absolutely no reason why, when you have polls that show that 90% of the Democrats and 75% of Republicans, or whatever the number is, very high, support this issue, that we can't get Congress to do it. It should be done. It should be a standalone vote, and let's get this off our agenda. It should not be tied to the wall or border security. It's just the right thing to do. I addressed this in January, and I believe that the DACA kids deserve relief, and they basically know no other country than the United States of America. It would be wrong to send them back, and they need a pathway to become full citizens.
In my opening remarks, I said that we need to deal with immigration in a humane manner, and the manner in which we have handled the Dreamers, the manner in which this issue has been batted around and batted around, is the most inhumane part of our immigration system, in my view. I am strongly in favor of a Clean Dream Act, a standalone act for the benefit of Dreamers, those children who are now adults, who were brought here as very young children and have never lived anywhere else, and have had the prospect held over their heads of being shipped back to a country where they know no one, they don't speak the language in many cases, and they have no source of support. It is time to incorporate Dreamers into our society and give them the benefits of being citizens here.
I pretty much agree with John and Susan on this. They should have a path to citizenship, and there should be a standalone vote. But I'd like to mention why we have this problem today. All presidents since Reagan did not act on illegal immigration. In fact, they tolerated it by justifying it, by saying they're doing work that other people don't want to do. So now we have this problem. So they should not be punished for this, and they have a certain date that they go by, and children who came into this country prior to that date would be considered the DACA children, and they should have a path to citizenship.
The 800,000 Dreamers should be American citizens. We need a Clean Dream Act, and because of Congress's inertia and inactivity and inability to hold the line and ensure that those young people have all of their rights restored, we have 132 Dreamers every day that are being forced into the shadows of shame. Those are our children, and we've got a right to protect them and treat them as every bit as American as those of us in this room are. That's part of the American promise. And if we don't do that, we can dare call ourselves a civilized, humane nation.
So I support full citizenship for the Dreamers, and come on, Republicans, let's get this together and let's get this done, and let's get it done now.
When President Obama issued his executive order for DACA, he included ages up to 35. So to describe them as kids is somewhat of a misnomer, and we should be precise in our language. President Trump was indeed correct. It is Congress's responsibility to address this. If I'm elected to Congress, before I will address this issue, first and foremost, we need to secure our border, and that means building the wall. Once that is done, then we can consider DACA, and my solution to that will be a legal status, but not a path to citizenship.
I am 100% behind having the Dreamers have a very, very short path to citizenship. I think it's only the right thing to do. When I've talked to many Dreamers, you can see the fear in their eyes. They don't know what their future holds. And think of that. Think if you were a person who had no idea of what your future would hold, that you might be shipped somewhere that you have no idea what that is, or where it is, or know anybody there. How would you feel? And I just can't believe that our government cannot stand up and say, hey, this is very important, let's get it done.
Thank you. The United States Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, which struck down portions of federal campaign finance laws, been very controversial. If you are elected to Congress, would you support or oppose legislation to constitutional amendment if necessary to overturn Citizens United? And exactly how would you frame that? And we'll start with you, Ms. Wild.
Well, I firmly believe that we must have meaningful campaign finance reform. I think there's far too much money in politics. It makes it very difficult. The price of entry into our political system is prohibitive. And I would work as hard as I could. It would be absolutely in the top of my agenda, maybe not number one, but very in that top 5 list, because we are preventing some very good people from entering politics. We're preventing some very good people from getting elected if they do dare to venture in. And frankly, it's corrupting, and we must get that kind of money out of politics. We need a meritocracy, and politicians should be voted for based upon their qualifications.
This is one of the important areas that I'm running for Congress to change. The Koch brothers abused Citizens United to actually buy the United States government. They own Congress. They own the Senate, the House of Representatives, and now they own the Supreme Court. The Koch brothers are spending $600 million in the midterms. That means if one of us win, we're going to be up against maybe $1 million of attack ads from the Koch brothers in this next election. I am all for overturning Citizens United.
We absolutely have to overturn Citizens United through a 28th constitutional amendment or through adjudication at the Supreme Court level. The average United States senator has to make raise $15,000 a day, which is about $5.4 million, in order to be considered competitive for a federal race. That makes it virtually impossible for ordinary folks to run for office, and that's absolutely undermining democracy. Senator Dick Durbin on the Senate side from Illinois tried to pass a Fair Elections Now Act, but because we don't hold a majority of seats, it's kind of dead in the water. That Federal Election Now Act basically says that grassroots candidates who opt to run for Senate can get a matching base grant from the federal government if they prove their viability through getting a certain amount of grassroots in-state dollars from ordinary folks.
So I oppose Citizens United. I think it's a national security threat. We've talked a lot about the impact of money in politics, the amount that is raised and spent, and people in Congress spend about half their time raising money. So we elect them as legislators, and they're a part-time legislator, and then they're a little bit more of a part-time fundraiser for themselves. So they're really not doing their job, and they're not really learning as much as they should about the issues. But the real serious aspect that I see with this is foreign involvement in our elections. We don't know where this money's coming from. The Chinese certainly know how to get the money now into our electoral process. The Russians certainly do. Any foreign agent now is going to have the ability, and has the ability, to fund these attack groups for their agendas, to benefit their countries and not ours. And that I see as an extremely serious national security threat that should be talked about more.
Every time I hear the line about the Koch brothers buying Congress, I'm reminded of the scene in Forrest Gump where he's talking about the $1 million wound, and he says, the Army must keep all that money because I ain't seen a nickel of it yet. I'm telling you, the Koch brothers must keep all that money because I ain't seen a nickel of it yet myself. I'm opposed to any change to Citizens United. It is about free speech and free speech for all. Keep in mind that the original issue in the case was a company made a film about Hillary Clinton, and they were going to be denied the ability to broadcast that before an election. Think about it. The New York Times, a corporation, can print whatever they want about whatever candidate they want without restriction. Yet somebody else cannot make a movie and print it, or moreover, the question was asked to the plaintiffs or the defendants in this, if they had produced a book, would you have been in favor of banning that book? And the answer was yes. We cannot have that in the United States of America. We need free speech for all.
To me, when we talk about Citizens United, we talk about campaign finance reform. And I totally believe that. I mean, we had a question earlier that was related to that. And I said, I do not take money from PACs. I don't think that anybody should be able to place a large amount of money on any particular candidate, because that then makes that candidate dependent upon that particular person. And I think that is just wrong. And so I would be fully in favor of getting legislation that would hold up in court, that would create a reasonable finance reform so that we can have candidates that go to, that run in elections that are gaining support from the general public and not from corporations and very, 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 very wealthy people.
Dean Browning's right about one thing. The Citizens United case was decided on First Amendment basis, free speech. What he's wrong about is that it's free speech for all, because we don't have free speech for all. We have a campaign finance law that was put into place many, many years ago that limits individuals. An individual can only give $2,700 or a couple $5,400, and that's their limit. So if you're running, any one of us, and we have some rich friend who would like to give us more, they can't. But Citizens United has created now these super PACs, so billionaires can throw hundreds and hundreds and millions of dollars, no limits, into these PACs, and these PACs can go into any election that they feel like doing and basically wipe out anybody. They can wipe out a candidate who is stuck with these limits of trying to raise between $2,700 and $5,400. It's a bad decision. If I'm elected to the Congress, one of my first things I'm going to do is, because the only way we can overturn it is through a constitutional amendment, because it's the Supreme Court said it's free speech. We need a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United.
The next question. Pensions in the private sector have become a relic of a bygone era. Why should members of Congress receive taxpayer-funded pensions when so few taxpayers have the luxury of receiving pensions? Do you support H.R. 322, the End of Pensions in Congress Act? If so, why? For future members, that is.
Start with
I went first.
Certainly. Pensions in the private sector have become a relic of a bygone era. Why should members of Congress receive taxpayer-funded pensions when so few people have that luxury to receive pensions themselves? Do you support H.R. 322, the End of Pensions in Congress Act, for future members of Congress?
I've always been concerned about the pensions in Congress. For instance, a senator can finish one term of 6 years and collect $170,000 a year for the rest of their life, and I don't understand that at all. I believe that congressmen and senators should have like a system where if they put in, like, let's say $200 a paycheck, it's matched by the government and they can have that. That would be a nice retirement fund. But right now, we are being buried by benefits that are given to congressmen.
So as someone who doesn't have a pension right now, so members of Congress make on average $174,000. They've got a Cadillac insurance plan. They can write laws that they themselves don't have to follow. You know, and so I would absolutely support that resolution. I would also say that the salaries of members of Congress should be set by the median income of their congressional district. Let them tie their economic fate to the person struggling in that district and see what happens to that voice and that vote on the floor.
Good. Well, I support that because a pension should be for a career, and Congress shouldn't be your career.
Right, right. Say it.
This past January, I turned 62. I've worked almost 40 years, my entire life in the private sector. I do not have a pension. My retirement is going to come from the money that I've saved through my 401k plan. I think that is something that is typical for most of the tax-paying public in this country. Therefore, I am fully in support of no pensions for Congress that are not available to the majority of the tax-paying public. But that really doesn't, that's a symbolic approach. The bigger issue are public sector defined benefit plans that are going to bankrupt this country, state by state, school district by school district, city by city, unless we do something to change that. It's great for the symbolism in Congress, but we need to take action elsewhere.
I believe that Congress or any governmental agency who has benefits that do not reflect their constituents is wrong. When I took office in Easton 10 years ago, I was told, oh, you qualify for the pension plan. I said, I don't want it. I don't think that that's fair. And I think that this legislation would make things fair. And I think that that's something that we should try to always encourage, whether it's pensions or medical care, which are also tremendous benefits for Congress. There are several different things that I don't think Congress deserves because they're Congress. I think that whatever the people have, that should be what Congress has.
Yes. Well, first of all, I haven't read H.R. 322, so I'd like to read it, and I'd like to know who's sponsoring it. But I generally agree with the concept that Congress should not have lifetime pensions. You know, the Republicans always talk about term limits, and this would be a great way to have term limits, believe me. I mean, it would encourage folks to go down there and serve a few years and come home. Pay them a good salary, but when they don't get a lifetime payment for the rest of their life. I am not in favor of the assaults on pension plans. I think someone mentioned for people like public school teachers, firefighters, police, who have a long career in public service, putting their lives on the line, teaching our children, and there is an assault. And that's why I'd like to know who sponsored this, because when you start going down this pike of public, you have to be careful that you're not going down and starting to look after folks who may give a career to education or law enforcement, et cetera. But for the elected Congress, I say pay them a good salary, but the pension, no pension will bring them home, and they won't be there 20 years, believe me.
I don't think anybody should go to Congress and make it a lifetime career. It's certainly not something that I aim to do at the age of 60. I've had a healthy career for the last 35 years, and I have no interest in spending another 35 years in a different career. I think that benefits paid, whether they be pension, health insurance, or otherwise, should be reflective of the amount of time spent in a job. That's how it is for everybody else, and that's how it should be in Congress. I actually concur that we should not get away from pensions in the public sector. I think they're an important component of compensation for school teachers, for firefighters, for policemen, and for municipal employees. So I'm not in favor of getting rid of pensions overall. I think
District attorneys.
you're a public sector employee.
All right, sir.
And if you go to Congress, you'll collect that pension, by the way. And I think 401ks are a dismal alternative to the traditional pension plan.
Okay, we'll now be wrapping up the debate, and we'll give each candidate an opportunity to make a closing statement to clinch their argument for the audience. And we will start with Mr. Browning.
Thank you. I believe my argument has already been clinched based on the reaction of the crowd. Again, thank you all very much for coming tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. It should be obvious I am not a career politician. I've worked for 40 years in the private sector, balancing budgets, meeting payroll, cleaning up messes, some created by myself, some created by others. I've made a career of solving problems, developing solutions, and working to get those implemented. I would take that skill set to Washington to do two things. Number one, bring a different perspective to Washington. For far too long, we have sent career politicians or attorneys, forgive me, Susan. Roughly 40% of the members of Congress are attorneys. They are less than 2% of the general population. That's a match. I have a skill set that will allow me to bring a different experience and focus to problem solving. It will allow me to hit the ground running, to work on 3 specific areas. Number 1, securing our border, strengthening our military, and growing our economy. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Dean. Applause before I speak, even? Oh, okay. Well, I think I should just sit down.
Yeah. We're happy to get out of here.
While you're ahead.
So thanks for coming out tonight. I am running to be a legislator. I want to do the work of being a legislator. I am not going to spend time raising money. If that is necessary, I'll have somebody else do it, and I'll keep a dividing wall between us, because I don't want to know who's donating to a campaign or not, because I don't want to be influenced. They can support me because of my general principles. Other than that, I don't want to know. When I worked for Paul McHale, I had the sense that that's what he did. I know that he was a strong legislator. I know that he studied issues. As a social worker, I like looking to solve problems and to improve situations, and I realize that we're not all the same. There's a lot of people like Dean out there, and we have to work with the other side. But bottom line is to provide solutions to regular working people, and in my case, particularly senior citizens. Thank you.
Our nation is at a critical juncture. We're a nation that elected a man by the name post 9/11 Barack Hussein Obama, and we elected Donald J. Trump. And we're at a critical point where we can no longer fence walk our values. We have to decide whether or not we believe in the words in that founding document that says we all have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This seat, the United States House of Representatives, we forget it's the people's house. You're voted on every 2 years because the decision is that that person must be closest to the epicenter of everyday struggles and economic hardships. We've got to elect someone who hasn't read about poverty, who hasn't read about being middle class, but who actually has their fate tied to the common good of all people in that district. I want to go to Congress not to take a seat, but to take a stand. And I think now is our time to be unapologetic and push for a people-centered legislative agenda that leaves no one behind.
I've spent over 40 years doing a lot of studying and research and following like Nobel economist Milton Friedman, Stiglitz, to really understand what's going on in this nation, because a lot of this really comes down to finance. And when we see the national debt, you can see that something has to be done, and universal health care can solve a problem. But I'd like to end by just mentioning what I'm proud of, one of the best endorsements any person could have. My 6-year-old grandchild, Olivia, says, "My grandpa cares about little people." And she is correct, because the little people today will be the leaders tomorrow. And it's my job going to Congress to make sure the little people today have the resources to move this country ahead tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you all. The comment that I get most frequently when I am out on the campaign trail at this kind of forum or debate is that I don't smile enough. And when I watch video of myself, I realize it's true, and it's probably because these are really serious problems that we have. I am very, very worried about the future of this country. And I want to take the 35 years of advocacy skills that I have honed in a courtroom to Washington so that I can fight for the people of the 7th District. And I do take it very seriously. And if I don't smile enough, that's probably why, because of where we are. I really want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. It's interesting that it's the League of Women Voters, but I think at least 50% of the people in the room are men. That makes me very happy. We need the same thing in Washington, by the way. We need to see about 50% of our representatives be women. And with that, Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And I'm very encouraged by all of you being here and the interest that has been shown in this campaign of all of these candidates for the last 8 months. Thank you.
I got involved and interested in politics at a young age. When I was 12 and 13 years old, living on Southside Bethlehem, and bumped into Congressman Fred Rooney, who was one of my mentors. And since that time, I've worked for Democratic candidates. I've contributed thousands of dollars to this party. Why? Because the Democratic Party had my family's back. As I mentioned at the outset, my dad, 6th grade education, my mom, 11th grade, but they were union people. They had a job, and the Democratic Party was there to take care of them and help me with a student loan through school. And that's why I'm a Democrat, and that's why I support our party. But as John F. Kennedy once said, we should not be looking for the Democratic solution to our problems or the Republican solution. We should be looking for the right solution. And if you want someone who's going to be in an ideological box, then vote for one of the other candidates, because I believe that we have to stand for what's right. And 90% of the time, my party's right, but sometimes I don't agree with them on some issues, and I'm going to stand up and say so. So I'd ask for your support. You know my record as DA. I think I've done a good job, and I think I could be a good congressman, as well as any one of these candidates here as well. Thank you very much.
When I started off tonight, I just asked you to remember a few things about me, okay? And first of all, an educator. You heard a lot of questions tonight related to education. As a professional engineer, you heard a lot of questions tonight about infrastructure and how our country is basically crumbling around us. Foreign experience. As a Fulbright scholar, I spent an entire year in Africa. I've traveled around the world for extended periods. And I understand different cultures. That's something that's very important for somebody in this particular office. Local government experience. I've had 10 years now of local government experience, and I think that's a very valuable thing to take to Washington to let them understand what the what impact they have on local government. I'm a veteran, and I'm also do community service. I do a lot of community service, and I want to do service to you, the people. Thank you.
Well, candidates, thanks for your time. I think that your answers gave people in the 7th Congressional District a good gauge on who they would like to represent them in Washington. Thank you.